Alright everyone, welcome to this presentation on the basics of government. Now, while you are watching this, you should be taking down notes in your binder. Remember that you need to be taking down not only what's being said, but also any key points or vocabulary that you do not understand. So, with that out of the way, let's get going. First, we need to talk about the different types of governments that exist. We are going to talk today about 10 specific types, but there are many, many more than that. The first type of government is actually not a type at all. It's called anarchy. And anarchy is when there is no government. So, if you remember from your reading, when you were reading with the philosophers, talking about the state of nature, the state of nature is exactly that. It's a system where there is no government in place, and people just act based on their own self-interest. So that's what anarchy is. There is no government. Number 2, a monarchy. In a monarchy, there would be rule by a king or a queen. So a very good example of this would be back in England during the time of the Revolutionary War. The English had King George, and the colonists did not really like King George all that much. They thought that he had too much power, and they decided to revolt. Now, the government that King George was ruling was a monarchy. When the colonists revolted, they wanted to get something closer to a democracy, which is number 3. You can see here that a democracy is ruled by the people. So what that means is that the people who are living in the country get to vote on the laws and the bills and everything that's going on in their country. So a democracy is a very progressive form of government. This is exactly what guys like John Locke really wanted. Thomas Hobbes wanted a monarchy. He thought that that was the best system. John Locke was of the belief that democracy was actually the best. Number 4, a meritocracy. A meritocracy is a rule by the worthy. So instead of being elected or being born into being a king or a queen, in a meritocracy, the people that run the government would have proven their worth in some way. So maybe they're all the smartest people, or maybe they're all the wealthiest people. But in some way, the people running the government would have been chosen based on their abilities. In a theocracy, this would be a rule by religious figures. So imagine that there's some kind of a church who creates their own state, and all of the religious figures are now in control. So take, for example, the Catholics. If you know anything about Catholicism, the leader of the Catholic Church is the Pope. Now, in our world, the Pope is not actually an executive of any country, but in this case, imagine a country where the Pope is the president, all the priests are the senators, and in order for you to get anything done, you would have to get it approved by the church first. Now, as we will talk about later, when America was first founded, the founders were very, very nervous about this. And so they separated church and state so that a theocracy could never become a real thing in America. Now on to the next 5 types. Number 6 is an aristocracy. An aristocracy is a rule by the nobility. Now, in America, it's kind of difficult to understand what a noble is, but a noble is a person who was born into a higher level of family. So we don't have this in America, but back in Europe during the Middle Ages, and actually going on even in some parts till today, depending on which family you were born into, meant that you were either a higher level or a lower level than the others. So if you were born into a poor family, you were most likely some kind of a peasant, which meant that you would not be able to have any real control of the government. It would be your job to do the lower type work. So that would be more of the labor. But the aristocrats or the people who were born into the more wealthy families, they actually got to control the government just because they were wealthy. It didn't have anything to do with whether or not they were good at ruling or not, but the fact that they were wealthy meant that they got to control the government. Number 7 is a republic. So in a republic, you are ruled by elected officials. Now, if you know anything about America, we are technically called a democratic republic. And what that means is that the people, all of us, get to vote. We get a say. But for the most part, who we vote for are these officials. So you, if you're 18 or older, get to vote for your congressman. So you get to vote for a senator and a representative for the House of Representatives. And then those people go off to the government and they make the choices for you. The reason that we are a democratic republic is that there still are some things that are voted on by just the people. So if there's a state law that wants to get passed, oftentimes it will go just to the public, and it won't have to go through any elected officials. But in a republic, a single citizen would never be able to vote directly on any part of the government. Number 8 is a dictatorship, and this is ruled by one person. The most famous example of a dictatorship would be Nazi Germany. And in Nazi Germany, Hitler was the one person in control. No one else could usurp him. He was the guy in power. Now you might be wondering, what's the difference between a monarchy and a dictatorship? Because a monarchy has a king or a queen in power, and a dictatorship is just ruled by one person. Well, the difference here is that in a monarchy, you become king or queen by being born into that family. Or you can marry into that family. But in a dictatorship, the person in control doesn't necessarily have to be related to the last person. So again, going back to Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler was not born into a wealthy family. He was born in Austria, and he was a fairly poor guy growing up, but he was able to rise to power and take over the entire country. And he became the dictator of that country. Number 9 is communism. Now, communism is a government where all property is owned by the government and then given out. So there's no private property. You as a person could not own anything. What would happen is all the things that are made in the entire country go up to the government, and then they decide who needs what. So for example, if you're a farmer and you're growing all your crops, all those crops that you grow go to the government, and the government then decides, all right, well, these people need this food, this amount of food, these people need that amount of food, we're going to give it to them. And you might be saying, well, hey, how am I going to make any money off of this? Well, as a farmer, you're not going to be making money. The government, after taking your crops and giving it out to other people who need it, are then going to come back to you and give you the seeds you need to plant your harvest. And they'll give you access to the water, and they will give you all the stuff you need to keep your business going. But you, as a farmer, do not actually own anything for yourself. The most famous example of communism was the USSR during the Cold War. So if you've taken U.S. history, you should know about the Cold War. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union got into this big rivalry where the Soviet Union were communists and the United States were capitalists. And we'll talk about that when we get to economics. But it was a very different form of government. And the last type of government we're going to talk about today is a confederation. Now, a confederation is a loosely connected geographic region, or many regions. So in this example, imagine that there's no federal government of the United States. Instead, each individual state is its own little country. So Louisiana is a country, and Mississippi is a country, and Arkansas, they're all their own different countries. In a confederation, all these states all around this area might say, you know, it might make sense for us to work together, but we're not going to become one country. We want to stay our own separate country, but we will all work together in a similar aspect. So we are all going to agree to follow these laws, and we will all trade with one another, and we will all decide that, 21 is our drinking age for this area, and you have to be 18 to vote, and that type of stuff. So even though there's not one central federal government, all these geographic regions still agree to work together. Now that we've talked about 10 of the very basic types of government, we are going to talk a little more specifically about the roles and the purposes of government. You might be saying, well, okay, I understand that these are all the different types of government, but why is there a government at all? Well, there are there are 5 purposes of creating a government. The reason people all throughout history have created a government all fall under one of these 5 reasons. So number 1 is peace. People want peace, they don't want war. And an example of this is that the US government maintains, well, actually all governments maintain peace by creating and enforcing laws. So the reason that people aren't just driving around as fast as they can or going around and stealing from one another is all because the government has created laws saying, no, you can only drive this fast, and no, if you steal something, you're going to go to jail for this long. And they do that so that as an entire group, the country can have peace and move forward together. So the first purpose of any real government is peace. The second main purpose of a government is to resolve conflicts. So if there's ever a problem between 2 people or 2 groups of people, it's up to the government to resolve those conflicts. So an example of this is that the government resolves conflicts by using the court system to deliver justice to those who deserve it and reprimand or give consequences to those who do not deserve it. So if you want to take an example like in our class today, if the government would be Mr. Herbers, his job is to make sure that while the students are working, if there's a fight between the students, his job is to make sure that whoever started the fight or whoever is in the wrong will get the proper consequence, and the person that was not in the wrong will be able to continue going on their way. It's more than just but it is more than just deciding who's right and who's wrong. It's also making sure that the proper person or groups get the proper consequence. So the first purpose of governments is to keep peace, and the second purpose is to resolve conflicts. Now, if you look at just these 2 together, you can see that they work together pretty well. It's going to be hard to have peace if there are conflicts going around all the time. So let's move on to the third. The third major purpose of government is economic stability. So an example of this is that the government keeps economic stability by monitoring the national economy and providing services for those who need it. So if you look at the stock market, and in 2007 when there was the recession, the government saw that the economy was going down and people needed help, and they were monitoring it the whole time. So when these big businesses were about to fail, the government decided that they were going to provide some money to keep these businesses afloat. Other examples of services that the government provides to keep economic stability would be something like unemployment. If a person is unemployed, then they will not be able to keep buying things, and therefore the economy is going to be in a little trouble. So the government provides things like unemployment, where they will help pay for a person who is out of work, so that they can keep being part of this whole system and keep everyone doing better in the long run. So we have peace, number 1, we have resolving conflicts, number 2, and we have economic stability, number 3. Hopefully you're noticing that all 3 of these so far all lean towards the same type of idea. The government is trying to keep people happy and at ease. Number 4. Number 4 is safety and security. So this goes even further than just peace. The government also wants to provide its citizens with safety and security. So an example for this is that the government provides safety and security by having a military to protect its citizens from threats. It's if you are a citizen of a government and they have no military and another country decides that they want to take over your area, you're not going to feel very safe or secure. On the other hand, if your government has a military and they continuously keep all of your enemies away from you, you will feel more safe and secure. So a major aspect of any government is to make sure that its citizens are okay and they feel safe, they feel secure, and they feel like they can continue going throughout their everyday lives. And again, this relates back to the three previous purposes. If you don't have safety and security, you're probably not going to have economic stability. People are going to be afraid all the time. You're going to have a lot more conflicts, and there's definitely not going to be peace if you as a citizen do not feel safe and secure. And now on to the fifth final purpose of government: services. So we talked earlier about some of the economic services, like unemployment, and that fits into this. But another example would be that the government provides services like public schooling and a fire department. If you are a citizen of the United States, you are guaranteed 12 years of public schooling, which means the government will pay for your schooling and they will do what they can to make sure that you graduate with a high school degree. Also, a fire department. If your house or apartment lights on fire, a fire department will come and you don't have to pay a specific bill to the fire department afterwards. That's just part of the deal. The government is providing that service to you to try and keep you safe and secure, just like number 4. So now that you've had a chance to look at the 10 major types of governments and the 5 major purposes of governments, you are going to be given a couple worksheets, and you are going to apply this knowledge to those worksheets. So, if you have been able to get all the notes written down and you feel confident, go see Mr. Herbers right now.